Welcome to the Connor's Corner segment of Ask the Lawyer. A couple of weeks ago, I was out in California, happened to stop by the John Wayne Cancer Institute, and I met our next guest, Robert Klein, who is a football player. How you doing today, Robert?
Thank you, but please call me Bob.
All right, Bob. Okay.
My mom only calls me Robert when I'm in trouble, so
okay.
Bob it is. Thank you.
You're not in trouble.
Great. It was great being able to spend the weekend with you.
You were a number one draft pick. What year was that, and where did you play in college?
Okay, well, so I'm a Southern California guy, and my mom and dad met out here during the Second World War, and then right afterwards in 1947, I had a little bit older sister, but I came along. And so I grew up here right in Los Angeles in Pacific Palisades, which is one of our outstanding beach communities, and I spent my whole life here. And I played, in those days, we played all the sports, and so I was fortunate enough to have pretty good size. I was 6'5" and about 245 by the time I graduated as a senior in high school. And that was a big tight end in those days. It's kind of the size that the guys are playing now. And I fortunately had a good high school career. And my choices, I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic schools my whole life. And I had about everybody in my family and anybody that had any influence over me saying Notre Dame, Notre Dame, Notre Dame. And in those days, that was Ara Parsegian, and they were doing well. But I had a very wise principal. He was a brother of St. Patrick, who took me aside one day when I was a senior, and the pressure was coming on me from all sides, including my dad and my uncle, who grew up they all grew up in Chicago, went to Newt Rockney's summer camp. And the very wise principal said, what do you want to do, and where do you want to live when you grow up? And I said, well, I love Southern California. I want to go into business. And he said, go to SC. That's the right thing for you. So I did do that. And I went to SC, and I was there at a very good time. Coach John McKay was the coach then, and I was fortunate enough to play on a national championship team, and we had lots of great players. Probably the most infamous and famous was O.J. Simpson, who was my running back. And we had a bunch of us, a number of first-round draft picks. And lo and behold, I get drafted in the first round by the Los Angeles Rams. And, I mean, how great is that for a kid to play at home?
I can't even imagine that.
What's more remarkable about it is the chances of getting drafted in your own hometown are slim and none, and the head coach was George Allen. Now, if you remember what George Allen liked, was he liked older guys, and so I ended up on a team with a bunch of old guys, the Rams, Fearsome Foursome, that group of guys. And George was a defensive coach. I was an offensive player, but anyway, he picked me, and I had a great career with the Rams. I played for them for 8 seasons, and I think we went to the playoffs every single year. Never made a Super Bowl with the Rams, but I played, I think, in 3 NFC championship games, 2 against the Cowboys and 1 against the Minnesota Vikings, and always had those were our 2 stumbling blocks in those days. And I had, in the off season, I had gone back to graduate school and got a master's in business. And it's a little different now than it was then, because you really didn't have much in the way of leverage with ownership on negotiating things. And the only thing you could hold out on them is that you were going to retire. And I had a contract renewal time coming up, and I played my cards, and they called my bluff, and so I retired. But I only retired for the summer. And Tommy Prothro, who was the UCLA coach when I was in college, and then ended up being the Rams coach and was my coach for 2 years, ended up going to San Diego, and he was the coach of the San Diego Chargers, and it turned out that they didn't have a tight end. And so at the end of the summer, after missing all of the training camp, I got a call from Coach Prothro, and he said, would you come to San Diego and play? Well, from where I live to San Diego, it's 135 miles, and I had 3 young kids, new house, my wife, and so forth. And I said, well, I can probably do this. So, believe it or not, in those days, I commuted 135 miles each way. Now, I only had to do it for 5 or 6 months out of the season. But I went down there, and Coach Prothro was only there really for 1 year, and then we didn't have a great season, and so they brought in Don Coryell. And so I got to play with Eric Coryell and Dan Fouts and that whole group. So pretty much my whole career of 11 years was on winning teams, and really the last 3 down there were fun for me because I got to catch more balls in 3 years than I did in the 8 with the Rams.
I think that's worth noting. A lot of people don't realize statistics are not always just about the player, but who the quarterback is. What is the team doing? What's their offensive philosophy?
Sure, and now the tight end is a very integral part of all the NFL offenses in college as well. And they will have 2 or 3 tight ends in a game. They're big guys. A lot of them, could be playing basketball, but they're playing football. And they use their bodies, they use their size, and there's just a lot more passes thrown than there were when I was playing. It was always, with a pass, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong. What can you do if you hand the ball off? So I was in an offense, especially with a guy like OJ. I mean, you want to give him the ball anytime you can give it to him, and so it's morphed into, I think, a much better, more interesting game now, much more entertaining in the NFL. And aside from the injuries and some of the things that can befall you through that, I think it's really it's been, especially this last Super Bowl and so forth, has been for us in Los Angeles has been a thrill for this season. Poor ending, but a great season in general.
Yeah. Now, okay, what are you doing today?
Well, I am the executive director of the St. John's Health Center Foundation, which is a hospital in Santa Monica, California. And fortunately, we are a community hospital, but I'd like to say we're a community hospital kind of on steroids, because we have 2 very famous and well-known institutes associated with us. One is the John Wayne Cancer Institute that you're familiar with. And John Wayne lived out here, went to SC, my school, and through his film career, and then towards the end of his life, he developed cancer. And there was a gentleman, doctor over at UCLA, Don Morton, that was taking care of John towards the last couple of years of his life, kept him alive. And Don decided to move the John Wayne Cancer Institute from UCLA over to St. John's, really kind of almost overnight. And with that, he brought researchers, and he brought clinical trials and different things that a community hospital typically didn't benefit from. So since then, that was 30 years ago, we've been doing things that really are remarkable, that are making a difference within the world of cancer. We train cancer fellows, surgical cancer fellows, and to begin with, and now we have about 140 cancer fellows working around the world, a lot within the United States, and that all started here. And then as an adjunct to that, over the last few years, we've developed something called Pacific Neurosciences, which has to do with maladies of the brain tumors and so forth, and that has a big connection to John Wayne. So my job is raising money for those 3 buckets, for the hospital, John Wayne, and Pacific Neurosciences. And I've been doing it now for 28 years, and when I first started, I kind of didn't know what I was doing. I do now. And the reason I ended up in this job was that I was a active volunteer of the hospital, and the chairman of the board of the hospital happened to be a gentleman by the name of Jim Hesburgh. You may know the name Hesburgh. Hesburgh is the Notre Dame Hesburgh. Father Ted Hesburgh. Notre Dame was his brother, and he would come out twice a year, and I developed a relationship with him because he would tease me about passing up on that great opportunity of going to Notre Dame many years ago. And so one day, Father Hesburgh told Jim, his brother, he said, you've got a guy, Bob Klein, that you ought to get involved in fundraising for your hospital and so forth. And so they approached me and they said, Father Hesburgh had a guy at Notre Dame that had some of your similar traits and background, and he didn't know what he was doing to start with it, but he really developed quickly, and he ended up being a great fundraiser for them. So they talked me into it, and that was a long time ago. And so here we are at St. John's and the John Wayne, raising money and doing a great job. And I think really the mission and the things that we work. I mean, it's a blessing to be able to get up every day and raise money for this place because we're making a difference in people's lives, really.
Now, if somebody wanted to learn more about the John Wayne Cancer Institute, St. John's, how would they do that?
Well, you just go right on the web and just Google John Wayne Cancer Institute, and there's a website there that can tell you just about anything that we do, all the clinical trials. We get people, from all over the world because there are certain things that we're doing here that nobody else are doing. We originally were known specifically, most importantly, for melanoma cancer, but that's evolved into many different cancers that we treat. And even if someone is interested in learning more about cancer, and the whole thing, the John Wayne Cancer Institute website is a remarkable resource. It really is.
Now, if somebody's out there in the audience right now, they may say, well, you don't really need my small donation. I mean, but every dollar counts.
Absolutely. Every dollar. I mean, we have, and frankly, because of the exposure that you've given us, we get donations from the East Coast, and the people that are touched by cancer. And of course, it doesn't have to be just you, but of course, if you've been through this with anyone in your family, any loved one, and especially if you've survived, you want others to be able to benefit from what they've learned, what they've been through, and so forth. And so we have more small friends certainly than we have large friends as far as contributors. So there's many different ways. If you go on our website, if you go on the John Wayne Cancer website, there's lots of ways that lead you to donate, and specifically you can identify things that make sense to you or areas that you would like to support.
Any last thoughts to our listeners?
No, but when we spent some time together a couple of weeks ago, I loved meeting you and your wife, and because I don't really have any good friends living in Brooklyn or from Brooklyn, so now I do. And you're going to see me back there, and I hope you come see me again.
Now you have a place to stay.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that.
and as soon as our house gets in order, we have more than one bedroom. You could bring the whole family.
Well, thank you. I just got grandkids now. All the kids have left us, thank God. But anyway, yeah. So.
Okay.
It's been great getting to know you guys, and we very much appreciate it.
You were so gracious,
well,
and we appreciated it so much.
Well, I don't know if you checked the weather out here, but it's been raining since you left, so you got the good spot.
No.
Yeah. We're having an El Nino year, which means we get rain we normally don't get. So,
okay.
But we need it because we're a semi-arid region.
Well, listen, we appreciate everything you do, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful group of people that we met.
Well, thank you. It was great having you out here, and so you're welcome anytime.
Thank you, Bob Klein.